Now, Ask Dr. Love with psychotherapist, author, love and relationship expert Jamie Turndorf, Ph.D. For expert advice on love and relationships, call into the show at 888-463-6748. That's 888-GO-FOR-IT. Or you can submit your question online at AskDrLove.com. Now, here's Dr. Love.
Hello again, and welcome to Ask Dr. Love Radio. I'm Dr. Jamie Turndorf, and it's my pleasure to be with you again today. So I have a question for you. Do you speak from your heart? I mean, are you truly authentic in your intimate relationships? Meaning, are you willing to leap off the ledge of love and speak from your heart? Well, if you're like most of the world, your answer to my questions are, hell no. But don't worry, you're not alone. Most people hide behind their intellect and speak about thoughts. And even when they think they're speaking about feelings, they're actually verbally attacking others using what I call fight traps, like name-calling or character assassinations, rather than describing their feelings in a constructive, relationship-supportive way. So in truth, being real in the right way is really hard. And for most of us, the hurt, the humiliations, and the teasing that we suffered as kids causes us to lash out or shut down and armor ourselves. And while this armor may have protected us when we were young, it certainly isn't helping us in our adult relationships. And this is because when we wall off from those closest to us, we feel alienated, lonely, and disconnected. So the only way to truly feel close to those close to us is to speak from the most vulnerable, scared, and young part that still lives inside all of us. Now, many of us find the courage to be real and speak from our hearts when life shakes us up, like when we are facing a serious wake-up call, like an accident or an illness. And these wake-up calls remind us how short our ride on earth is and that we better get busy loving or get busy dying. Now, I don't want you to have to wait for tragedy or disaster to unlock your heart. So stick with me, because I'm going to help you discover how you can leap off the ledge of love and speak from your heart right now. So I want to introduce you to media personality Ann Quasman, host of Woman Talk Live, because she's going to be sharing how she found her voice following a sexual assault. Ann Quasman is the host of Woman Talk Live, which she grew from a local radio show that was plunked down between male-focused programming to a true community of women and men who actively engage in conscious conversations. And now she's going to be continuing her conscious conversations on the Woman Talk Live podcast starting in 2014. And I think she's going to be broadcasting this out of Vermont, where she just moved with her husband and her 2 cats to live out their dream. So are you here, Ann?
I am here and ready.
Hi. Hi.
Nice to finally meet you sort of in person.
I am so excited to meet you too. So it took us long enough, right, to get together, but here we are.
Absolutely. You know, those life changes and transitions get in the way sometimes.
I tell you what, it's a constant transition, and every time we think we find high ground, we just fall flat on our faces again.
Oftentimes, and sometimes that's for the best, though.
Absolutely. So talk to me about your mission, how it developed, including all the details, right?
Yeah. Well, when I first started the radio show, Woman Talk Live, what popped into my mind was having conscious conversations, because I feel like a lot of times our conversations are not very conscious. You know, we're saying what we think people want to hear or what we think we need to get across, and in selling ourselves, and we're often not really being who we are. And so when I started, the radio show, I wanted to have just down-to-earth conversations with women and with men about, what was going on with them and, why they were bringing their gifts to the world without a sales promotion, and so it sort of evolved from there, and it's really turned into a passion of mine to be able to not only give myself permission to be more authentic, but to give other people that permission too.
Now, you said, and I thought this was so fascinating, that you've been brave enough to tell your authentic story. You said that you found your voice And the big catalyst for you in this was a sexual assault. Are you comfortable to talk about that?
Absolutely. And I've got to say that, probably I was searching for my voice all my life, because even when I was young, even, if anybody looked back on me when I was a kid, they wouldn't have said that I didn't have a voice, because I was one of those, wild kids playing in the backyard and, leading the charge in the forts and, everything else. And being quiet was not me. But as far as having a real voice and being able to say what I thought or what I was feeling, that wasn't there. And I was so embarrassed about getting up in front of people and talking. I really did not have a voice and didn't think I had anything to say or anything that anybody would want to hear. And it was so bad that in high school, I actually got a doctor's permission slip to drop out of speech class so that I wouldn't have to stand up in front of a room and talk. And I thought I was through all of that, went to college, had to take speech class, and couldn't get a doctor's excuse, so I got a prescription for Valium.
Yeah, when you can't get a prescription to get out, you got to get the Valium.
Yeah, and,
Right.
So I have no idea what I said, but, I got through speech class and, kept on going, went out into the working world, thought I'd never have to speak again until my boss asked me to travel around the state of Texas giving presentations. And,
Yeah.
I just almost, died. And so, what I did, I went to a Dale Carnegie course and learned how to stand up and give a presentation, but I still did not have a voice of my own. I could recite whatever I needed to, tell people or get information across or teach something, but it wasn't my own voice. And it wasn't until I was 33 years old and I was actually abducted out of a parking lot. And when that happened, it was 9 o'clock at night. I looked around the parking lot and there was nobody in the parking lot. And I absolutely froze, and nothing came out of my, mouth. I just froze, and the only thing I could remember was, don't let them get you into the car, and don't let them take you away from the scene. And that's exactly what happened. And
He got you in the car and he took you away?
Yeah.
Oh. Wow.
And, so from then on, all I could think about was, I'm not going to make it. And he proceeded to tell me I wasn't going to make it, that, this was going to be the end of me. And this, went on for a couple of hours. And luckily, at some point, when I had just about given up, he got out of the car and my hand fell on the floor of the car and landed on the keys. And that was like life shot through me, and I was able to jump up, shut the door, lock the door, and finally get the keys in the ignition and get away.
Oh, wow. What a story.
And,
what a story.
Well, what was so amazing to me, and the thing that helped me, get through this was, he was a serial rapist. And,
right.
And I was able to help get him caught. And that was a big healing point for me in going through, that whole process. But it was amazing, how you beat yourself up when something like this happens, and all survivors have a tendency to do that. They blame themselves. I shouldn't have gone there. I should have, done this. I should have done that, or whatever. And my thing was, I beat myself up about not having a voice, not being able to yell, not being able to fight back. And I realized I had no voice and that I had to find it. And so the healing process for me really, came about or helped give me a voice, because I knew I had to talk about what happened, and I had to work with other survivors so that I could find my voice. And
wow.
So is this the way I would have chosen to do it? Absolutely not.
No. But oftentimes it takes these huge shakeups, like incredible sicknesses or accidents or assaults or the loss of a loved one. And these shakeups are wake-up calls. The thing too is that a lot of times victims become depressed and self-blaming because they do not access the rage. When you're violated, you feel enraged. And so often for women especially, when we're socialized to be good girls and nice girls and sweet girls. And so to be enraged is not compatible with the ideal female gender role. So you stuff the rage down and you don't put voice to it, and then you get depressed. Or you attack yourself, which is a form of rage turned back on the self. And so for you, when you went out and actively got this person caught and prosecuted, you were actually taking the rage and putting it into action, which helped, to break the self-attack.
Absolutely. And I often feel that's what has always gotten me through this, is knowing that I did something about it. And even though it was still easy to, fall back into the blame and the self-blame, and I often think about, all of the, all the news that we're hearing about college campus sexual assaults and, women not coming forward, or in the military, and, the things that are going on. And it's the blame that a survivor puts on herself or himself.
Right. And, it is so part of the culture as well to I saw recently that film with Jodie Foster, The Accused, where we blame the victim. You asked for it, you provoked it, not realizing that these sexual assaults are not acts of sex, but acts of violence and violation, And I remember that film, well, how did you dress? And you asked for it, and it's just so foul what goes on. And I remember I had a patient, Anne, some years ago. It was one of the most tragic things. She had been sexually assaulted as a young girl, and she always blamed herself and said it was my fault, it was my fault. And I realized I received this intuition that the reason she thought that it was her fault was because she actually had pleasure during the assault. And that's not something a lot of people who have been victimized talk about, because our bodies are wired for pleasure. So if you have pleasure, then you think, the brain makes this incorrect association and says, well, if I had physical pleasure, then it must mean I asked for it. Well, the two don't go together, You
Absolutely.
Can have,
It's so interesting. It's so interesting that you bring that up. A year or so ago, I interviewed Wayne Coffey, who wrote a book called No More Stolen Childhoods, and he's actually got a nonprofit organization by that name. And he was sexually assaulted as a child, and he brought that up during the interview. That, you feel that a child often feels like they took part in it because there was some sexual pleasure in it.
Yeah. Yeah, what are you going to do? This is how the body is wired. So that really freed her when I was able to help her. And I hope anybody who's listening and has been assaulted and felt pleasure, that that doesn't mean you asked for it. It's not your fault. So what is so neat about you when I listen to you talk is that you radiate such a positive life force, such a love energy. A lot of people have been abused, become very bitter, and this is not your energy at all, Anne.
Well, it's taken a lot of work, and I just realized that if I held that inside of me, it was going to eat me alive and keep me from living my life. And,
absolutely.
That there would never be any pleasure in my life, and it would always be doom and gloom. And, I don't think that's not who I was beforehand. And so, I didn't want this to take full control of my life. And I've just been lucky and very fortunate to have very supportive friends, supportive family, and a supportive husband, that understands this story and, knows exactly what I went through is the best of their ability, But it's amazing that being able to talk about it really is what gave me my voice.
But I'll never forget the case of a person who was hospitalized in an inpatient facility and had a complete breakdown. And he wrote the memoir of his return to healing, and the book was called The Words to Say It. And it was simply by being able to put into words what was going on inside him that he healed himself. So words do have the power to heal. They also obviously have the power to harm. And we're going to be talking more about that when we come back. I'm going to take a brief break, and I'll be back with you in a moment on Ask Dr. Love Radio.
You're listening to Ask Dr. Love with Dr. Jamie Turndorf. To speak to Dr. Turndorf live on the air, call 888-463-6748. AskDrLove.com is the web's premier relationship advice site since 1996. Visit AskDrLove.com to search thousands of free relationship advice articles on any relationship issue you may have. Or you can submit a question to her free advice column. However, if you're listening live, why not call in? Don't be shy. Dr. Turndorf wants to help you, and this is a unique chance to get a personal answer from one of today's most respected experts. So, if you have a question for her, please call in now at 888-463-6748. That's 888-463-6748. Now back to Ask Dr. Love with Jamie Turndorf, Ph.D. Once again, here's Dr. Love.
Hello again, and welcome back to Ask Dr. Love Radio. I'm Dr. Jamie Turndorf. Today I'm talking about speaking from the heart with Ann Quasman, host of Woman Talk Live. And this is the time in the show that I call my quickie. See, I couldn't even get it out. I had to say it too fast. This is my quickie. It's a short segment. So I want to just share some tweets. I always do a few tweets on the topic of the daily show. So here are some tweets on the topic of conscious conversation and speaking from the heart. Love grows in the soil of authenticity and withers in the presence of emotional duplicity. Allowing your authentic self to shine through is key to allowing others to love the real you.
Wow.
You like that one? Oh, good. Wow. This one I wrote right after my husband died of the bee sting. The walls that we erect in an effort to self-protect merely lock us in a jail without any hope of making bail.
Wow. Amen.
Yeah. And when the heart shrinks, our love life stinks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bring in authenticity to heal, and you will find a love that's real. Be real, and hearts you will steal. And when your heart is unfurled, you will rock the world. When give fear a shove, leap off the ledge of love. And when you love yourself, warts and all, true love will magically come to call.
I got to tell you, that is true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is true. It is so true. And allow your true self to shine through, and you will make a love breakthrough. Same idea. And when you give yourself a license for authenticity, love will soon follow with surprising simplicity. Those were 3 on the same point. And don't wait till you're hit by a Mack truck to allow your tongue to cluck. Oh, let's see. If you want connection, you need to make a fear defection.
Yeah.
Yup. And being real is the only real way to deal. And here's my last one. Don't wait till you're an old fart to speak from the heart.
Well, that just seems right in line with me, too.
So, I was saying before we took the break that a lot of people make the mistake, and I actually did a whole piece on this in my column for Psychology Today. I think I called it the honest truth about honesty, that a lot of people think, oh, well, if I'm going to be authentic, if I'm going to speak from the heart, well, I'm just going to let it rip, and I'm just going to rip you a new you-know-what, and right. I'm just being honest. And this is such a fallacy, you know?
It is, and I hear and I see so many people doing that.
I know, and it's
saying,
awful.
I only speak the truth. Well, you know.
Who said you're supposed to speak the truth? That is such a fallacy, because this is like my lifelong ministry. It comes from having a mother with a viper tongue, Ann. I mean, this woman, she could cut you dead with her tongue. So I think it became my ministry to just say, no, we don't just say whatever is the truth or just being honest. We only want to say what we know is going to be beneficial not only to ourselves, but the other person and our relationship. Well, if it's only going to benefit us, if it's a form of self-gratification, we're getting our rocks off, we don't want to do it, because obviously we're hurting the other person then, and then it's going to boomerang back on us and hurt us too.
Right. And I always say, when I hear people say, I only speak the truth, well, whose truth? Whose truth?
Right. Otherwise known as the, just a bag of poop that I'm putting on your head because it's my truth. We don't want to indulge ourselves. We don't want to gratify ourselves at another person's expense. We only want to say and do what we know is going to be helpful. And this really requires discipline, Discipline,
Well, so, what do you think then is the difference? Here I am interviewing you.
Tell me.
Is the difference between speaking your truth and authenticity?
Well, the thing is, we want to be authentic. We want to speak our truth, but not if it involves assaulting another. We have to find a way. I use the image of an imaginary sieve, and we want to filter the raw garbage through the sieve, and then we want to convert what we wish to say, that is our authentic truth, into a communication that we know is going to be beneficial to everybody.
Right.
So like somebody said to me in one of the groups I run last night, she said, well, what if I just want to say to my husband, you're an a-hole? That's what I feel. That's that's not a feeling. That's an attack, So what you want to do is you want to get down to the emotional core that's beneath your anger, because anger is a big smokescreen anyway and a big garbage pail, right, that covers up what we're really feeling. If you're angry, well, maybe you're really hurt. Maybe you're really scared. So get down to your authentic emotional core and speak from that place, Well,
why do you think, because this is one of the things that I've seen, and one of the things I've noticed over the past 7 years interviewing people is that, when you're interviewing somebody that really is coming from their heart and authentic, it.
You can just tell.
You can just tell. And
all right, so Ann, let me tell you this, because this is coming from my heart. I hate to have to take a break. Remember, this is my quickie.
Yes.
I hate to leave you, but I'm coming right back, all right?
Okay. I'll be here.
I'll be back in a sec on Ask Dr. Love Radio.
You're listening to Ask Dr. Love with Dr. Jamie Turndorf. To speak to Dr. Turndorf live on the air, call 888-463-6748. That's 888-463-6748. If you like what you're hearing, you can learn about Dr. Turndorf's techniques for turning conflict into connection and healing in her critically acclaimed, groundbreaking book, Till Death Do Us Part, Unless I Kill You First, a step-by-step guide for resolving relationship conflict. Find out more about this book and read a free excerpt by visiting AskDrLove.com. This is Ask Dr. Love with Dr. Jamie Turndorf. And if you have a question for her, please call in now at 888-463-6748. This show is for you, the listeners, so please give her a call now. You're listening to Ask Dr. Love with Jamie Turndorf, Ph.D. Once again, here's Dr. Love.
Hello again, and welcome back to Ask Dr. Love Radio. I'm Dr. Jamie Turndorf, and I'm talking today with Ann Quasman, host of Woman Talk Live. So, Ann, we were saying before we took the break, you said, I can tell when people are speaking from the heart. How do you know?
Well, I don't know. It's just this feeling I have.
It's a feeling, right?
It is definitely a feeling, and it's so interesting to me because the conversations or the interviews that I always did that were the most fun were one that they just flowed because it was an exchange of ideas and feelings and whatever. Where the other ones, it was almost like a mask was on.
Yeah, right.
And they were saying the points that they knew they had to say.
I know it's like shoving a wet noodle up a wildcat's butt. It's very painful, very painful and
very
difficult.
Painful and difficult to do.
So how are we doing? Our conversation is flowing.
Yes,
We're
I feel
doing
that way.
really, really well together. So let's talk about this, because I promised in my newsletter that I was going to talk about the secret key to finding our voice. And I think that you would agree that one of the biggest obstacles to finding our voice is fear, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Right. So
because,
let's talk about that.
Who would want to listen to us, And I think that we so often think we don't have anything to offer,
Right.
and it's that nobody would want to hear what we had to say, and it shows up in not being able to raise your hand in class and ask a question, or not contribute anything at the office meeting, and it's something that we have to learn how to do if it's just not naturally there.
Well, it's interesting because I remember hearing a study. I went to Vassar College on the undergraduate level, and they said that when it was all girls, the women spoke up. The minute they made it co-ed and there were males in the classroom, the girls stopped talking. Isn't it interesting? Yeah, because it's sort of, what do they think of me? Will they think I'm too smart? Will that turn them off? And it's interesting because when you think about how we came out, we were fearless when we came out. We didn't come out and say, wow, did I pop out by turning in the wrong direction? Did I go left when I should? We don't second guess ourselves. But then, as life comes upon us and we are made fun of, for the mistakes we made, or, we had an accident in class, or we fell, or we get ridiculed by our peers. And suddenly that's when we start to lose parts of ourselves. We lose our voice, right?
Right. And what else I think contributes to that is if, perchance we were shining in some way, and that, that light that we were sending out was too bright for anybody else, so they sort of dim you,
That's an interesting thing. There's a jealousy, a competition, right? Right,
or don't show up your brother, or don't show up your sister, or don't show up your best friends, or
right,
whatever. And so you almost impose a barrier on yourself so that you won't shine too brightly.
Right. I had a patient for many years who could not speak. She always felt like her tongue was tied when she needed to say what she needed to say at work or with her partner, with her kids. She couldn't talk. And she remembered that her brother was learning disabled, and her mother always said to her, listen, don't make your brother feel bad. Don't make him see how inadequate he is next to you. And so she cut her tongue literally not to upstage her brother.
Yeah. And so I think there's all sorts of things that lead us to that, because you're right. We come out in full glory and somebody beats it out of us along the way.
Right. I had another patient, Ann. It was the most amazing thing. She could not say a sentence. She would start to speak one word and she couldn't talk. And what we found out was that when she was a little girl, she got slapped in the face when she talked. And so this developed this trauma reaction in her where she couldn't even speak, because speaking to her was so dangerous. But we fixed it, little by little. She was in a group that I ran, and little by little her voice was welcomed, and she could talk the arms and legs off a snake now.
Isn't that interesting though?
Yeah.
But I know it's so interesting now to me, Dr. Turndorf, that there are so many books out there about women, leaning in and doing this and doing that, and that's great for a segment of women that, number one, want to lean in, and number two, have the skills right now to do that. There's a whole lot of women that need to start at the basics and start working on their confidence and using their voices.
So you just spoke about leaning in, which is to own your dependency, to be vulnerable. That's what you're referring to?
Well, I was thinking more of Sheryl Sandberg's book about, being able to use our voice and ask for what we want and demand this and demand that, and, go into the higher echelons in corporations. And I just think that, there are lots of women that is the path that they want to take. But for so many women right now, that doesn't even seem like something that's on any type of radar screen for them. They just need to learn how to stand up and use their voice in the PTA meeting.
Right, or even in your intimate relationships, because,
Exactly.
if you were taught in your first family that speaking up was not received well, or you got punished for speaking up or laughed at, now you're going to feel that same crippling straitjacketing, cat got your tongue feeling in your intimate relationships. So often people will say, well, how do I begin? How do I begin? Well, the first step I find is that you have to begin to know what you are actually thinking and feeling, because when you were shut down from the youngest age, you don't even know. So I'll say to people, what do you feel? And they'll say to me, well, what are my choices? I don't even know. Mm-hmm. So I do this little exercise that is a really good way for us all to find the authenticity that lives within, because obviously you can't share what you don't know that you're thinking or feeling. So I do, that the commercial in the 80s, or was it the 70s? It's 8:00. Do you know where your child is?
Yeah.
So I say, well, it's 8:00. Do you know where your inner child is? Do you know where your inner voice is? Check in with yourself on a regular basis, like make a discipline every 15 minutes. Check in. How am I feeling? Like being a really good mother who, a mother would say to a child who's quiet, uh-oh, you're awfully quiet. What's going on? What are you into? So you do this with yourself. You're awfully quiet. What's going on? What are you thinking and feeling? Are you comfortable? Are you getting what you need? Like we're being our own parent to ourselves and correcting for all the damage that was done that made us lose our voice and our access to our authentic hearts, right?
I think that's beautiful. And it's so funny that you would bring that up, because maybe yesterday or the day before I had shared something with a group of women that basically said, at some point in the day, for 5 minutes, just lock yourself away and close your eyes and do some deep breathing and just ask yourself, what does my heart and my soul want me to know right now?
Mm-hmm. There you go. And I love the idea of doing it more regularly, because when you think about when we're young, we don't just get checked in on once a day, right? Mm-hmm. A good parent's checking on us all the time, just really, shadowing us and being there. So we really need that kind of consciousness with ourselves, that then we bring that love of the self into our relationship, right?
Right.
And then for me, the biggest thing is, it's for many of us, we can talk about loving feelings, but then what do we do when our toes are stepped on? How do we talk about that from the heart in a way that is loving, and not damaging to the other person? How do we do that?
Yeah.
Or blaming, and you'll hear a lot of people will speak about I feel statements, say I feel this and I feel that, which is fine, but there are even limitations to that. I talk about that in Kiss Your Fights Goodbye, because sometimes if you're dealing with someone who's very closed and defensive, you can say, I feel, and the other person will say, well, so what? What's it got to do with me? Feel whatever you want to feel.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. That's your problem.
Yeah, that's your problem, and that doesn't open up anything. Mm-hmm. So in those cases, we need to be able to go to the next step and describe how we're experiencing the other person's words and actions, so that we're saying when you do this or you say that, and if the person's really defensive, we can't even say you. We have to say when such and such is said or done, right, or when such and such is, said or done, this is how it lands, and this is what I would prefer. And, there are ways to voice everything. If we do it in a way that's embracing the other person, we can talk about anything and be true to ourselves.
How do you feel then that someone who has not been able to use their voice, how do they start? Where do they start?
Well, I think that, that's where my book, Kiss Your Fights Goodbye, comes in so handy, because I literally show you what to say and how to say it. Because if we never were modeled how to speak about our feelings, we don't even know how to say it. So I show you, I have an XY formula you just use my XY formula no matter what you want to say. You can be authentic for positive communications. If you have negative feelings, you use the XY formula. The X is how I feel, Y is what was said or done, and then you add a suggestion for the future. And we just use that formula. It's kind of formulaic, but you pop in what is your authentic truth into that formula so that you know how to speak no matter what. And then
well, I
we
was
just
going to
practice.
throw another monkey wrench in here with social media being so big and texting and emailing. There's something that gets messed up in communication.
Are you not kidding me, or what? It's so messed up. You're right.
And people try to carry on relationships via texting. And
can you imagine? You can't believe how many couples come to me on the verge of breakups and divorces because, can you believe how he spoke to me on text? He wasn't even talking to you, because you have no body language, you have no visual cues, you have no vocal cues. You cannot tackle emotional I can't even say it. You can't tackle emotional topics via text. You just can't.
Well, and I'm also wondering, having a generation of children that have been raised communicating this way, what happens when they get out into the real world and want to have a face-to-face relationship with someone?
I know. Well, it's sort of like you have to sit in the same room and text what you want to say to each other. No, it just does not work. You have to get live. You have to get in somebody's physical space, look into each other's eyes, talk the old-fashioned way. I always say I will not have any kind of emotional communications via text. We have to talk in real time, the old-fashioned way. I'll just use texting for, to confirm a meeting or something like that. It just can't, it's so limited. And people are missing the true authenticity. You can't be intimate in this way.
I almost feel like, there's times in families or in relationships where you just have to go offline, almost off the grid.
Yeah.
Just so that you remember how to have a conversation with each other.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing that's also so scary about texting and IMing and all these other technologies is it makes it easier for people to act on impulse. So if I'm angry with you, I can just shoot off a text so fast,
Right.
and then I'm doing such damage. So it's encouraging generations of impulsivity, instead of learning to control ourselves and think about it and how's this going to affect the other person and our relationship. No, I'll just fire it off. And boy, do we pay a terrible price for that. It's encouraging more impulsivity, and we need to be slowing it down and learning how to sit on our impulses. And people always say to me, oh, well, then that means you're suppressing or stifling. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying we want to just,
So how does that, do you feel like, takes away from anyone being authentic? Because anybody can go on their Facebook page and, post, everything in my life is fabulous and, whatever. And, it's the exact opposite, when they turn away from the computer. So do you think that this culture that we're in right now is chipping away at people being authentic?
I do. I really, really do. And the thing is, I'm coming full circle now to the whole thing about fear. We're talking about fear. Everybody's saying, I want intimacy. I want connection. I feel so lonely. I feel so disconnected. Well, the only way we really feel connected is by having the courage to face our fear, unzip the door, unlock the door of our hearts and reveal what is truly going on inside us, our fears, our terrors, the things that give us joy and sorrow, the real feelings that we're afraid to show. But it is only by allowing those feelings to be verbalized and seen that we truly have intimacy, connection, conscious connection, speaking from the heart. We can't speak from the heart unless we're naked,
Right. Right.
And how do you do that on a text or in a Facebook post? And what's so amazing is when I say leap off the ledge of love, because when you do that, what you discover is now you're giving the other person license to take his or her zipper and unzip the zip of his soul or her soul. And you now are sharing, you're meeting on that ground of intimacy. And now we're really connecting. Now we're connecting from the heart.
I think that there's so much to be said for that, because I will tell you, I married someone that was not used to verbalizing their feelings and held things close to the chest. And over the past 19 years, I'm amazed at how much he's changed.
I want to hear this. Let me just take a brief break, and then I want to hear more about this, because this is so fascinating. I'm just going to take a brief break, and I'll be back with you in a moment on Ask Dr. Love Radio.
You're listening to Ask Dr. Love with Dr. Jamie Turndorf. To speak to Dr. Turndorf live on the air, call 888-463-6748. That's 888-463-6748. If you've recently been through a breakup and are looking for a second chance, wondering how you can reconcile with your ex, or if it's even possible after all you've been through, Dr. Turndorf's latest book, Make Up, Don't Break Up, presents her 5-step plan for reconciling with your ex. This plan was developed out of years of research, working with thousands of couples at her Center for Emotional Communication. This is a proven no-hype and no-nonsense method that gets right to the root of the problem to guide you to the right path towards reigniting a lasting relationship. For more about Make Up, Don't Break Up, visit AskDrLove.com. You're listening to Ask Dr. Love with Jamie Turndorf, Ph.D. Once again, here's Dr. Love.
Hello again and welcome back to Ask Dr. Love Radio. I'm speaking from the heart with Ann Quasman, host of Woman Talk Live. And before we took a break, you were telling me how your husband transformed over the 19 years you were together, where at first it was close to the vest, and then he began to open up and speak from the heart. So tell me more about that.
Well, it's just really interesting because, first of all, I'm a firm believer that, we attract to us almost the exact opposite to us. I mean, that really happens a lot as far as personalities go. And while I was, sort of out there and much more an extrovert, he's very much an introvert and very quiet and very close with his feelings. And for the first several years, that just really burned me up. Because I wanted him to be talking and I wanted him to be sharing his feelings with me and, more compassion and all that. And it just wasn't happening. And, then, I don't know if there's some wake-up call that goes on in a relationship when you realize you start looking at their good qualities instead of everything else you're trying to change about them.
Well, that's what you do. But a lot of other people just focus on what they hate until they actually kill each other or get divorced. Right?
Yeah,
but you're an optimist. You're always looking at the relationship half full.
Yeah. So there were so many good things that, about him and so much I've learned from him. And I think when I eased up on, what was getting in the way for me, then I was able to be myself. He was able to be himself. And the best of the both worlds rubbed off on each other.
Mm-hmm. So you're talking about pushing versus going with the flow?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
Right.
And the pushing just does not work.
Yeah, it's like, who wants to be told what to do? It just makes us more rigid and more solidified in whatever it is that we're doing, because it just reminds us of our parents telling us to clean up our room,
Exactly. And, and people have personalities that are just different from each other. And so, for somebody that's never learned to express feelings, that's just not something that's going to happen overnight.
The thing is, you said something interesting a minute ago about opposites attract, and this is so very true that we do attract opposites, and it turns out that for most couples, that's what is the demise of the relationship, because they're so different, they end up fighting about everything. But what you did that was so clever was you allowed your opposite traits to enable the both of you to stretch so that he became more open thanks to you. So you brought out something in him that he hadn't yet attained, and then he helped you become more accepting and going with the flow. And perhaps he also taught you how to be more patient, and sit with certain things. You don't have to say everything.
Right, and also, he's very much an analyst, and thinks things out. And, sometimes you have to do that. You just can't fly by the seat of your pants in your heart all the time. There has to have some brain energy in there somewhere. And, so I'm very grateful to him for that.
So he helped temper your emotional side. He helped you bring in some of the rational side. So you both helped each other grow, which is obviously the ideal of all of our intimate relationships. So now you also... You said you wanted to talk about transitions and how you link transitioning to authenticity and speaking from the heart and conscious conversation. So how do you make that connection?
Well, the way it feels like it's being made for me because I'm living transition right now. You know, we've been in the Baltimore area for 19 years, and over the summer we just decided that we wanted to spend the rest of our life up in Vermont, which is
it's
where
so
we
beautiful.
vacationed for the past 20 years, and it's wonderful. And so, you know, I'm leaving everything that I know, everything that sort of defines me right now, and, you know, moving into a new phase of life. And I don't call it retirement because, you know, I think I'll be, you know, kicking as long as I can. And, but it's just going to be a different form of life. And so, you know, how do you carry your authentic self into a new life? And I'm really excited about it because I think there's so much of me that I haven't explored yet that, you know, a lot of new stuff's going to come out. So I don't know what it is, but
what's so great about you is that your enthusiasm for discovering new parts of yourself and new aspects of life is stronger than your fear. Because to be able to make a transition, you have to be able to have the interest, you know, and the hunger for new discoveries overtake fear, right?
Yeah. Well, it's so funny because, you know, when I first told people what we were doing, it was so funny because their fears would come out.
There you go.
How are you going to make friends? Well, you know, that's never been even, you know, on my radar screen as far as a worry. You know, how am I going to make friends?
Right.
You just make friends, you know.
Exactly.
And you know, what are you going to do? Are you going to get bored? And I don't think I've ever been bored a day in my life.
If you're not bored where you are, you take you with you wherever you go.
Yeah. And so it's just really interesting, but I feel like the transition part and the authenticity part is something's going to come out that's even more me, you know?
Oh, yes, because you're not on the rat race so much, so you can just let your inner voice speak and you will be taken where the wind of your inner voice leads you. And you and your husband will have more time together, right?
Oh, yeah. And, you know, we'll also be in a part of the country that offers a lot of the things that we love to do, you know, as far as hiking and road biking and cross-country skiing. So we are really looking forward to this.
Oh, my goodness, you're going to get to play, which is so fun. You know, and that's a big thing, too. I remember my old supervisor, Lou Ormond, saying to me that the people who are the healthiest have the enthusiasm of a child. And so children just love to play, and it's so much fun. And you've retained this part of yourself.
Yeah, you know, I feel like I really do feel like I have. And so that I'm looking so forward. In fact, last night, I'd gotten some information about curling classes.
And now, are you talking about curling your hair?
No, I'm talking about like in the Olympics, the sport curling.
Oh, jeez. I'm very hair focused. I'm thinking curling hair. I need a class on it.
And they were all up in the town we're moving for. They're offering classes and that. And I said, we can learn how to do that. And, you know, Bob rolls his eyes. And so, you know, there may be some limits. But
yeah, he's keeping you grounded, right? Because if you say bungee jumping, hang gliding, he'll roll his eyes and keep your feet on the ground.
Exactly.
That's so funny. So now you're going to continue your show.
Yes,
from your new place.
I'm taking several months off just to, because we were selling houses and packing up and staging and all of that, and we will be headed up to Vermont in May actually, and so we've got a little bit of time, but I will be doing podcasting versus broadcast radio.
Now, why do I think you're moving to Woodstock, Vermont?
Because I don't know. That's where I'm moving.
Yeah, I have this weird psychic thing going on. It's extremely odd. People who know me intimately just are used to it by now. But so
that's exactly where I'm moving.
Yeah, I loved Woodstock, Vermont. I remember when my husband and I went there one day. We were walking down the street, and Charles Bronson just walked right by me.
Oh, well, last summer when I was up there and I was in the farmer's market, and I turned around and Joe Perry, who is one of the guitarists for Aerosmith, was standing right next to me.
Yes, it's a very cool place.
It is a cool little town, yeah.
Yes, it is. So now, what about this work that you're doing with the Maryland Coalition Against Sexual Assault? Are you going to still be doing that work?
Well, what I'm going to be looking for, I've been on the board for the Maryland Coalition Against Sexual Assault for the, 3+ years, and as an advocate, and also their focus is really on legislation and advocating for victims and survivors. And so, what I plan to do is, find where I can become involved up in that area. And one thing that really interests me is, the talks and the conversations that are going on in college campuses. And Dartmouth is close by, and they have a new initiative for working with sexual assault on college campuses. And so I'm just going to find out what's there and see, how I can become involved.
All right. And what can I promote for you in the last few minutes of the show? What would you like everyone listening to know that you are doing or that you're selling? How can I help you?
Well, if you go to womantalklive.com, I have a weekly newsletter that comes out because I'm a blogger, and also, we'll be having information about the podcast when they're rolled out. But they can also get a freebie from me, which is some of the quotes from some of the top quotes from people I've interviewed over the years, and also a poem that a friend of mine wrote about women talking. And so anyway, they can get a copy of that if they go to womantalklive.com.
That is very nice. All right. And are you going to ever go back to terrestrial radio again, or are you going to just stick with the podcasts?
Right now, I'm not going to say what I will ever do and what I won't
There
do.
you go. That's the right thing to don't say what I will and won't do. Just allow the spirit to flow through you. That's a new tweet.
Exactly. So there you go.
I'm really glad that you came on my show. When I reached out to you, I think that I saw you on Twitter. Isn't that where I reached out to you first?
Yes, we connected on Twitter. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And at first when you checked me out, you said, well, what do you want me to talk about?
Well, I was getting ready to say, I'm not a love expert.
I know, but if you are talking about speaking from the heart and being authentic, you are a love expert.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because if you are doing this for yourself, this is the ultimate act of self-love. And we cannot have healthy love relationships if we don't first love ourselves.
Absolutely.
Right? So you're just a love expert who just didn't label yourself as a love expert. How do you like that?
Well, now I've got a new title. I've got to go change my LinkedIn profile.
Yeah, Dr. Love says that you're a love expert. If that's what you're doing, you're a love expert. And, think about it, right? Because what better way to love ourselves than to honor our inner voice and our inner wisdom and our inner truth? And so many of the problems that we have in our lives and our relationships just go away when we really love and accept ourselves truly. Because how can we love another? How can we accept another when we're pulverizing ourselves, not listening to ourselves, dishonoring ourselves, right?
Right. Exactly right.
Yes. So, and I've really enjoyed talking with you. I find you to be just a lovely, lovely person.
Well, thank you. I've enjoyed talking with you, too, and look forward to keeping up with all you've got going on and having you join me on a podcast in the future.
Oh, and then I can talk about your specialty, love.
Yes. Then you can be the love expert.
And you're very generous, too, I love that about you because it was, I thought what was so neat is, well, of course, you allowed the conversation between us to just flow very organically. So you were not competitive of the space. You asked me questions. You're just lovely. So I'm going to say not goodbye, but so long. And everybody just keep on consciously conversing. And I'll see you next week on Ask Dr. Love Radio.